We are fortunate, very fortunate to have someone like Adrienne Adams, the former Speaker of the New York City Council, which is an enormously important job, to agree to come as a running mate with me, my partner in government. And we so look forward to introducing Adrienne to the rest of the state and let the rest of New Yorkers see what I see in her.
Welcome to New York One's Off Topic on Politics. I'm New York One's investigative reporter, Courtney Gross. This week, Governor Kathy Hochul finally announced her pick for lieutenant governor, the person who would take on that position should Governor Hochul win re-election later this year. The selection, former City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams, perhaps not seen as a controversial selection, but it did make more waves than we possibly thought it would. We'll discuss all that. And then, is the honeymoon period over? Mamdani's initial handling of the biggest snowstorm we've seen in a couple of years was said he did a very good job. But now, in the aftermath of that storm, and as cold continues to hold its grip on New York City, we've seen many people die as a result of that cold snap, and people are questioning his management style. We'll get to all of that. And of course, our Bobby Cuza is here.
Honeymoon over.
I know, it's
already
February 5th.
Didn't take long. If we had,
well, this is the question. I mean,
we'll get to it.
Okay. Yeah. The question was whether or not he was capable, as the young person that he is and with little government experience that he had, capable of managing a city that has as much bureaucracy and layers of bureaucracy as New York City. And I think the snowstorm was his first big test. Initially, people said he had done a good job, right. And then now we're questioning whether or not that's actually true. The person that's been following this is our Dan Rivoli, politics reporter. Been a long time since you've been on the pod. Very happy that you're here.
Glad to be here.
So you have been following this, Dan. So
correct.
Actually, we're going to start with the lieutenant governor pick. Why did I go there? Because it was on my mind. Anyway, so we're actually going to start with Governor Hochul and what's happening with Governor Hochul. The Democratic State Convention starts on Friday. We were taping this on Thursday. We got word of the lieutenant governor pick just yesterday. On Wednesday, Adrienne Adams, she is a friend of the podcast. We know her very well, obviously being the city council speaker for 4 years. She is from Southeast Queens. She was the first Black speaker of the New York City Council. People wouldn't think that this wasn't necessarily a controversial pick. What does she serve on the ticket for Hochul?
First of all, I guess I'm not very plugged in because I had no idea Adrienne Adams was under consideration.
Bobby.
There was kind of a short list that I thought included people like Brian Cunningham and Walter Mosley and people who turned her down.
Jamal Bailey.
Yeah, and right. And Donovan Richards, the Queensboro president, turned her down for the job. We can get into that later.
Well, I think he said he didn't necessarily turn her down, like, I don't want this job, but he didn't want to continue with the vetting process. It's the way that our Bernadette Hogan describes it.
Right. You can't fire me, I quit, is basically the...
Or just, like, don't look into me because, like, right. I'm going to ghost you or something, you know?
But Adrienne Adams, I think in some ways I guess you could call it a safe pick. I mean, the conventional wisdom in politics is always that you have to balance the ticket, right? So you have somebody like Hochul who's from Buffalo, so you have to pick someone who's from downstate. You have someone who's a white woman, so you're supposed to pick, a person of color. I guess, the thinking would be you would pick a male. In this case, she didn't pick a male. She picked another female. So we have the first all-female ticket for a major party in New York. And they're kind of on the same, I think... Fair to say they occupied the same space on the political spectrum. I mean, I don't know what that does for the ticket, but she's from New York. She's from Southeast Queens.
A hugely vote-rich area,
yes.
Especially if you're courting Black voters. I mean, this is one of the bases. There's certain parts of Brooklyn, but Southeast Queens is seen like Gregory Meeks territory. This is the spot, especially for mayoral races. We always talk about Southeast Queens. What's Southeast Queens going to do? Will it win for Cuomo? Oh, and then a win for Mamdani. Like, it's a bit of a bellwether, specifically among people who turn out quite regularly.
Right. I don't want to be the cynic here, but I'll play the part. Is really for the lieutenant governor, there's only 2 rules. Don't embarrass yourself or the governor, and
know how to operate scissors for the ribbon cutting.
That helps. All right, so 3 rules. Don't embarrass yourself or the governor. Know how to work a pair of scissors for the ribbon cutting, and be ready to become governor. I think with Adrienne Adams, I think she satisfies the first one. She's never comported herself in a way that was embarrassing or messy. She did, I think, had a reputation of being quite a strong arm on the council, punished some people who didn't see things her way, but nothing in the public. Not as much as previous.
Like
Fair.
Quinn, or I think that maybe there was a little bit of that.
A little bit, but nothing that ever spilled out or disrupted the council operation. Yeah. So she always comported herself that way. So she satisfies that. Whether she would actually make a good governor, that's a question for the voters to pick, because that is, you ask David Patterson, ask Governor Hochul herself, you have to be ready to be governor on day one if you are the lieutenant. So that's for the voters to decide. And
what about the scissors, though? Can she...
I don't think I've ever seen her.
I think she can operate.
I think
they're
so.
like the big scissors, though.
Or the shovel, or the shovel doing the ceremonial dumping of the dirt for groundbreaking. On the politics side, yes, she is from Southeast Queens, and you do need a lot of Black Democratic voters to come out in an election, especially for Hochul. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Adrienne Adams satisfies that, because we know she ran for mayor and got little Black support, or little support at all. She just just wasn't a factor in the mayoral primary. But that being said, this is her neighborhood. Those are her backyard. She knows those voters. So I think she can go out there and be a good person on the stump for Hochul, who, yes, is an upstate Democrat, from Erie County. But I think in politics in 2026, those regional differences don't matter much. We're in a media environment. Hochul spends a lot of her time in New York City. She governs as a very progressive Democrat. I think that is where the median of the party is generally. Mm-hmm. And so too is Adrienne Adams. If she is to the left of Hochul in any way, maybe on criminal justice issues, she is a little bit more progressive than maybe your standard Democrat here in New York City.
That's not even how she started. I mean, when she was first selected as Speaker of the City Council, I covered her mayoral race, she was seen much more as a moderate. You wouldn't have seen her necessarily pitch some of the pieces of legislation that the council ended up passing under her tenure, like the solitary ban or a lot of the NYPD legislation that we saw over those years. She was pushed that way because of the makeup of the council, and she ended up having to represent the body that ended up being much more progressive.
But she also went out there and defended those laws quite strongly.
She did. Yeah,
so
that's true.
It didn't feel like, or at least publicly didn't look like she was pushed, because she would go out there, defend it, articulate why it was good, go toe-to-toe with Eric Adams, who did not like
the vetoes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Does it even matter, though, the lieutenant governor pick?
Well, what did Dan just say? We've had in recent memory our recent governors have had to resign in disgrace, and that person ends up actually becoming governor. You don't know what.
More often than not, the lieutenant governor seems to become governor.
In our career, too, that's a lot.
It is actually quite an important post. Bobby, you mentioned earlier that she kind of came out of nowhere, but she kind of didn't at the same time. And we were asking her these questions. There was somewhat rumors of her being potentially floated for this position for a couple of months. We've asked her multiple times on camera, from my sit-downs with her during the mayoral campaign in June to previous conversations she's had with Errol, including an interview, like a closing interview she did with him in December. She was asked about it because people thought of her as a good, non-controversial pick. She represents a certain group of voters that you need to win in a primary, and we know that Hochul obviously has a primary in the form of Antonio Delgado. That being said, this jacket keeps on whatever. Anyway, our listeners can't see that there's buttons on these jackets. That makes a lot.
But our viewers can.
Yes, they can.
For those watching.
Anyway, but that was until yesterday, Wednesday, when the Brooklyn Democratic Party, after the announcement that Adams was selected, put out a statement. The Brooklyn Democratic Party is led in part by Assemblywoman Rodneyse Bichotte-Hermelin. She put out a statement that said, in part, quote, "Major statewide political decisions require meaningful collaboration with the party leaders and elected officials who organize, mobilize, and deliver Democratic victories. It is safe to conclude that the Brooklyn delegation on Friday at the state convention will be prone to voting against or abstaining support for this ticket." They withdrew the endorsement that they had of Hochul which they had just done a few days
So much for party unity.
drama.
Yeah, I mean, this is like so inside baseball and probably not really consequential in any way to the election or to the average voter, but just bizarre for the the leading Brooklyn Democrats to rescind their endorsement of Kathy Hochul, because they didn't like the LG pick.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, the thermostatic reaction of Donald Trump in the White House and New York being a Democratic state puts Hochul in a very good spot for re-election. Not that we're calling the race so early, and I'm not sure a rift with the Brooklyn Democratic Party is going to be so fatal to her chances, but I think it does show what kind of vetting did Hochul and her team do for picking a lieutenant governor nominee like Adrienne Adams that would have caused such a to-do in the Brooklyn Democratic Party. Also, I think it speaks to the Brooklyn Democratic Party, how riven it is with factionalism and how you have the chair of this party going out and trying to rescind the endorsement. I think it kind of puts attention on what is going on in Kings County.
I guess there were some rumors that Bashan Hermelin actually wanted the job, or that she wanted it to at least.
Well, now we know why she didn't.
From Brooklyn.
It violates my first rule: don't embarrass yourself for the governor. Now we know why she didn't get it if she really did want it, because you would go out there and put out a big public statement rather than grumbling behind closed doors.
I think this seemed to some people, including some other Brooklyn Democratic elected officials, just kind of petty. I mean, it seemed like she wasn't consulted, right? Hochul didn't come to her and give her a heads up that she was picking Adrienne Adams. Maybe she was hoping that some other Brooklyn politician, maybe herself, would get picked. But to come out publicly and trash her, I mean, there was statements from there was one from there was a couple of Brooklyn electeds who basically came out and said that this doesn't make any sense and that it's embarrassing for Brooklyn politics for the party to come out and do this.
Well, she had done this before when I mentioned that the Kings County party is kind of riven by factionalism. I mean, when one of her prominent Brooklyn Democrats, City Councilman Justin Brannan, now a former lawmaker, but when he was running for re-election, he was one of the few council members in the entire city who had a competitive Republican challenger, and she goes out and puts out a statement criticizing him and dredging up some of these old allegations. He was a workplace bully. And he's in the middle of a re-election campaign. So that's kind of how the Kings County Democrats operate. And we're kind of looking at it afar. Again, I think, Bobby, to your point about what this means for a Hochul, I'm not so sure. But to take some of our colleague Bernadette Hogan's reporting, apparently the Hotel Trades Council was also taken aback by the selection of Adrienne Adams because she had pushed a Airbnb bill that the hotel trades don't like. And I think with the Airbnb bill, there are a lot of homeowners in New York City who do like having an extra room they can rent out, kind of add a little bit to their income, maybe, helps them go on a vacation once in a while.
And this just comes as HTC and a number of the unions had endorsed Hochul the week before. So knowing that the hotel workers, which is really a political force and often dumps a lot of money into these races nowadays, they always do big IEs or independent expenditures for whether it's for mayor or council, or they spend a lot of money. So the idea that you might be ruffling some feathers amongst their leadership too is not necessarily a good sign. And
is this going to be a paper endorsement now, or?
And it's also, Hochul has had a bit of a track record of not necessarily picking people around her for lieutenant governor that have worked out successfully, i.e. Brian Benjamin, who got indicted. And then
and the charges dropped.
Charges dropped.
Yes. But
yes.
He had to leave the office, and then
he violated Dan's first rule of being lieutenant governor.
The governor. And then there's Antonio Delgado, who also violated Dan's number one rule because he decided to run for governor, and he's primarying her. So it's just, I think this election shows something about Governor Hochul's political prowess and how sometimes I think we've seen over the course of her governorship thus far that I don't want to say Adrienne Adams is a misstep. I think, I don't want to opine that way, but I just think there have been some of those missteps politically over the years that we've seen. Anyway, but she still secured a major endorsement. If you're talking about Adrienne Adams securing, the black vote, moderate vote, then you get a huge endorsement today, obviously, in the form of Mayor Zohran Mamdani, which wasn't necessarily surprising. They've obviously been governing, and in the short time that they've been governing together thus far, about a month or so, they've been doing so collaboratively, and it's been working out for them.
Yeah, but they don't agree on everything, Courtney.
They don't agree on everything.
Ask ask Governor Hochul, ask Mayor Mamdani. They don't agree on everything. They always say
They're
that.
going to work
say
together. And unlike Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio, they both like to bring this up.
Well, it's that universal child care. It's bringing the factions together, so to speak.
I mean, Mamdani endorsing Kathy Hochul it's one of those headlines that's like, I understand why it's a headline, it's notable, but also like the opposite scenario would have been a much bigger headline, right? If Mamdani didn't endorse her, or if he endorsed Antonio Delgado, that would have been a much bigger deal. Because, you know, they've partnered.
Think of the kids losing out on universal health care, universal child care because of some political fighting.
And then Mamdani, you know, he wrote this opinion piece in The Nation that I guess posted today, Thursday.
This morning, yeah.
And I mean, it was a long piece, but I think the upshot is like, yes, we disagree on a lot, but we're going to talk through it. And the most important thing is that we work together to move forward. You know, real change, including, you know, universal childcare obviously being the number one example of that. But he's trying to, I think, show to his base, you know, the DSA types, the left flank of the party, that she's okay, right? That
and that
Hochul
he's
is a safe choice, you know.
And he's going to still fight for those tax increases that Hochul does not want.
Yeah, and she'll help, you know, she will help advance at least some of his agenda, maybe not the tax hikes, at least not this year. But, you know, again, I don't think there was ever any plausible scenario where Mamdani was going to endorse Delgado, who, I mean, I think we can fairly say Delgado's candidacy has not really gotten any traction up to this point.
He did pick his LG selection as well this week. In a video, he announced India Walton was going to be his pick for lieutenant governor. We should remind our listeners, viewers, that this is the first year where they're actually running on a ticket, because it used to be everyone would run separately. And then what could happen is you would have a Governor Hochul all of a sudden in this hypothetical scenario. Governor Hochul wins, and then India Walton wins, and then they end up being the people who run the city, run the state government. It's happened in the past where you have that kind of antagonistic relationship where not the person you want it to be, your LG, actually
the shotgun ticket
wins. Yeah, so that's changed now. They actually do run together, similar to the way that
President and vice president, right? Yeah. So India Walton, I mean, I think she kind of made a name for herself, I mean, nationally, really, back in 2021 when she won the Democratic primary for mayor of Buffalo against Byron Brown, who was a well-known incumbent, and she, you know, is a DSA member. I think she was a DSA member even,
or at least left-wing.
She was very, very
like
left-wing,
like Bill de Blasio or something. Well,
and it was seen as this, like, you know, this bellwether or something, that the left was ascendant and toppling all these incumbents. But then it didn't work out quite the way people thought it would, because then, in kind of an extraordinary development, Byron Brown ran in the general election in November on a write-in campaign and won.
You gotta love a write-in victory.
Yeah,
so hard to pull off.
I mean, how do you win a write-in campaign? It's incredible. So anyway, India Walton then, you know, faded into obscurity.
You become bar trivia after a while.
But now she's back.
Yeah, she's back on the Delgado ticket. This is all going to go down, or all of this is happening at the state Democratic convention in Syracuse. Our Bernadette Hogan is there. It's happening tomorrow on Friday. This is when the party delegates get together and they basically vote on who should be the top of the ticket, right, Bobby? How does this work? What happens?
Why do we care?
Why do we care?
I mean, it's like
there's a West Wing answer to that, where it's like, how often do our political parties get together, meet in one place, and talk about the important issues of that? It's very West Wing.
Yeah, but
I mean, they kind of get to hang out.
If it's a closely contested primary, that's different.
If it were an open seat or something.
Yes.
Yeah. Where it wasn't clear, like, who the party was going to go with as their preferred candidate. But the bottom line is, it doesn't really matter that much, because even if you don't win the party's official support at the convention, you can still run. You can still run in the primary if you go out and get enough signatures. So it doesn't mean that there's going to be no primary just because on Friday they say Kathy Hochul's our
typically on the
candidate.
Republican side, when you have the Republican convention, whoever gets the party nomination usually just goes with it, and none of the other Republicans bother to petition their way on the ballot.
Right,
it does happen, but oftentimes, more or less, the Republican Party nominates someone and they kind of end up on the ballot being the candidate.
Yeah, but we don't expect Delgado to necessarily just drop out of the race because he doesn't get this particular.
Well, that's a good question.
Party.
I mean, I have no inside information, but I mean, I don't know. Does Delgado drop out once it becomes clear how little support? By the way, there was a Siena poll. Was it Siena that came out this week?
Yeah.
Where Hochul was up like 55 points or something on Delgado. So things are not looking great for.
Yeah.
I mean,
and she has so much more, 18 times more money than him. Like,
it's hard to make a case that this is a race.
It's an uphill battle, to say the least.
Let's leave it there. When we come back, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss the challenges the cold weather has brought to Mayor Mamdani.
As of this morning, 17 New Yorkers have passed away outside during this code blue. In 13 of these cases, preliminary findings indicate that hypothermia played a role. 3 of these deaths appear to be overdose-related deaths, while 1 remains unknown. We await final results from the medical examiner's office and will inform New Yorkers as we learn more. Each of these lives lost is a tragedy, and my heart is with the families who mourn their loved ones.
I feel like we have been in the frozen tundra forever. As someone who despises winter,
So do I.
like have seasonal affective disorder.
I like it one day. The one day it snows and it looks nice.
Yeah, I can take.
But we're in the grossest time.
Yeah, I mean, we are lucky. We have homes, we have jobs, we have the ability to stay warm, and we are protected. But there's a whole school of New Yorkers who are not. And over the course of this cold snap, we've seen the 17 people perish on the streets as a result. Many of them, the majority of them, as a result of hypothermia. Dan, you've been following this. You know, like I said in the intro, in the beginning or in the immediate aftermath of the snowstorm and the cold, everyone said, "Oh, you know, this was such a big task for Mamdani. He did a good job. Our streets are relatively clean. Like, yeah, there's a lot of snow, but you know, we were able to get to work the next day generally." But I think as the days go and the death toll ticks up day by day by day of the people that we see that are actually dying out on the streets, maybe people are starting to second guess that initial praise for him in the handling of the snowstorm.
That's right. It's no small accomplishment to make sure the city's not paralyzed during a snowstorm. But that being said, as the days went on and now we're going into weeks, there are real issues with the way Mayor Mamdani is following up. And I think he opens his administration with this slogan, "A New Era." And I'm covering him on this issue, and I'm starting to realize the new era is basically new for him. He's 34 years old, millennial, didn't have much of a work history before entering politics. And so the tools at his disposal as mayor are starting to fall short, and it's not really a new era. Like, we're going to make sure outreach workers are going to homeless men and women and telling them about warming centers and shelters and safe haven beds, as if no other mayor has done that. Many mayors have done that, and they find it to be such an intractable problem, and it's only becoming a bigger issue because we are in such a deep cold snap, and we are seeing a lot of people dying on the street. As you mentioned, the 17 people found dead outdoors. 13 believed to be hypothermia. Of course, the medical examiner will make that determination. 3 drug overdoses. 1 is an unknown cause and being investigated. And we are seeing that there are very limits of what Mayor Mamdani thinks should be done. And there's a disconnect between what he says and what is actually happening. What are just a quick couple of examples, right? The warming buses. Reporters have seen that in some locations, they're not where they're supposed to be.
This is one of the, I guess, what do we say? One of the proposals he put out after we started seeing the death toll start to creep up. He said, okay, we're going to put warming buses in high-profile locations where a lot of people who do not have homes end up congregating so that there is a place for them to go.
One of the problems is either they're not where they're supposed to be, or if they are, they're very easy to miss. Some of them had no signs or even just very small signs that are just quite easy to miss. And relying on outreach workers to tell them there are warming buses, you should go here. So something as basic as proper signage was just not done. Those are kind of the issues that Mayor Mamdani is facing. And he's the one setting the bar very high for himself, saying we're going to have a government people can trust. We're going to focus on excellence. He uses that word excellence over and over. And then you realize there are just these these results that are just not meeting expectation. And another one, for example, typically when a New Yorker sees someone in need who is homeless, they'll call 311. In a cold blue, now they're rerouting that to 911. Reporters have been telling him at news conferences, Mr. Mayor, we're calling 311 and we're hearing these automated messages. Sometimes we're not being connected to New York 911, or we'll call 911 directly. The information is not being accurately transferred, or we're just not seeing the ambulance come by. And the mayor just says, we'll look into it, we'll look into it. And so we are starting to see that some of his proposals are just not matching what should be done. And then he's also getting scrutiny about his very high threshold that he has on when someone should leave the street against their will. There have been 20 involuntary removals, and there is a question that he hasn't answered of, is that enough?
Right,
Should it be more? That is not a lot. We're talking about 1 or 2 a day. And he says this is a last resort, only if someone is a danger to themselves or others. But it's still a very high bar. And that's just how he and other progressives will handle an issue like that. They set a very high bar for when someone should be removed or when an encampment should be removed.
And I think during the Adams administration, the bar was when you have this level of cold. I think that, and I can't say for sure, but the Adams administration, which is much more apt, interested, or just willing to use the involuntary commitment law to get people off of the street just by
not even in the cold, just on a regular day.
on a regular basis.
Right.
So I think we all as reporters need to do our due diligence and compare to, like, during a cold snap during the Adams administration, what did he do and how many people died on the street?
Well, he didn't even have a cold
That's
snap
the thing,
like
is
this.
like you don't have a comparison.
The last one was like 2018.
Yeah,
so
and
that
I
was
will
de
say,
Blasio.
I mean, I don't want to say.
And let me just make a point, because you brought that up. The encampments, Mayor Mamdani has said none of the people who died were in an encampment.
Right.
But
Because
is that
he
by
doesn't
the
want-
grace? Is that by the grace of God? Is it the one thing separating them, having some kind of tent or a makeshift shelter on the street? We don't know. But he does say that. Still, I think it is deserving of scrutiny because, as I mentioned, he has a very high threshold for when the city will act in their interest.
And he's been kind of forced to explain that because you have seen, a lot of people, and I think a lot of this is bad faith Mamdani haters, including on social media, which we all spend way too much time on, saying, oh, it's the encampments, and because he refuses to do these encampment sweeps, that's why all these people are dying on the streets.
Listeners, there was a change in position, a change in protocol. The Adams administration did the encampment sweeps. The Mamdani administration came in saying no.
Right. But what I was going to say is that I don't want to, say this is necessarily to defend the Mamdani administration, but I think we in the media have this tendency to look at some tendency or something bad that's happening and look at these really alarming or seemingly alarming statistics, right? 17 people have died in the cold snap. That sounds terrible. But we're not comparing it to any baseline, like how many people normally die in a cold snap. And should Mamdani, it has actually occurred to me, like, maybe the Mamdani administration could have not even publicized this information, right? Like, typically we're not looking at statistics of people who die on the street. Like, Mamdani put that out.
I've looked. It could be between. I've seen it as few as high single digits and as many as more than 24.
Right. In a given year.
In a year.
Exactly.
So it means we're talking about 3 months out of the year, 4 months at most, perhaps.
Right. But in years where it wasn't as cold as this year.
Yeah, the city council is required to put out an annual report on how many people, unsheltered homeless people, die on the street every single year. But like the vast majority of those deaths having covered homelessness for many years, the vast majority of them are drug overdoses. That's just typically what it is. We don't see this type of weather.
Right. So, it's hard to do an apples to apples comparison. But, again, you can obviously question the Mamdani administration's policy on whether they should be doing more involuntary removals and whether they should just have somehow devote more resources to having people, canvassing the streets and trying to find people who are homeless and living on the street.
That is very standard. That is just very standard. And they have volunteers. They do contract with nonprofits. And I think we just are seeing the limits of that approach. And I think Mamdani is good at diagnosing the problem, but he has yet to, I think, present a solution. You hear a lot of progressives talk about root causes for all kinds of things on crime and on homelessness. And Mamdani does understand the root cause of people preferring to stay out on the street is that the shelters are too violent. and they just don't want to go there, and they'd rather be in the street or in the subway. So we're going to have to wait to see what Mamdani's shelter reform plan is. I don't think we have enough details, and it's just not enough to say we're going to have more safe haven beds, which are low barrier. And what is the barrier? You don't have to be in by a certain curfew. You do not have to be sober, for example.
Well, and we should mention that he has added beds just in the past.
And he added in
He has.
shelter, but
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. But I think you do need eventually a wholesale reform plan of the shelter system if you want to make a dent in the population of street homeless men and women.
Yeah. He also has to deal with clearing the ice
And
from
the
streets.
garbage. I
Yeah.
mean that is just such a visual reminder. I mean, garbage piles taller than me in my neighborhood. Although I'll just say recently, within the past day or so, sanitation was able to clear it, but it was noticeable. And again, this goes to Mamdani saying we're gonna have a new era of government, but it's the same old problems that we've seen. Bus stops that are caked in snow, so people have to stand on the street to catch their bus, garbage piled extremely high. So this is where the rhetoric is falling short of the expectations.
Okay, we're gonna have to leave it there. I will say they're picking up the trash in the Rockaways, and we are normally forgotten, and everything is just fine out there, but that's just fine.
Peachy.
Everything's great. Okay, let's leave it there for this week's episode. You can always watch us on Inside City Hall weeknights at 7 o'clock. If you like what you're hearing, leave us a review. You can reach us by email at yourstoryNewYork1@charter.com. You can subscribe to Off Topic wherever you get your podcast. Thanks to our producer, Anthony Roman, and thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you next week.